I lied, cheated, stole, and ruined lives to build the perfect life. And now the truth is eating me alive. I don't know how to start this confession except by saying that everything you would see about me on the surface, the smiling photos, the LinkedIn posts, the happy birthday wishes, the invitations to charity galas and community events, it's all a carefully crafted lie. A facade so perfect that even I sometimes forget that it's built on a mountain of corpses. I'm not being metaphorical when I say I ruined real lives to get where I am. If you knew me today, you would think I'm one of those people who has it all. Good career, beautiful wife, perfect kids, a big house in the good part of town. You would envy me, admire me, maybe even aspire to be me. But every inch of the ground I stand on is soaked in blood I spilled, and every night when the house is quiet and my wife and kids are asleep, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if there's enough good deeds in the universe to ever scrub my soul clean. Spoiler, there isn't. I grew up poor, dirt poor, the kind of poor that leaves permanent scars even if you escape it. My parents were functional alcoholics at best, complete disasters at worst. There were months when the electricity was shut off because the bill wasn't paid. Winters when we heated the house with the stove left open and prayed it didn't kill us with gas. School was a joke. Teachers either pitied me or ignored me. And by the time I was a teenager, I had already learned the first and most important rule of survival. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted to live, I had to take whatever I could, however I could. I wasn't a criminal in the traditional sense. No drug dealing, no armed robbery. I was more insidious. I lied, I manipulated. I made people believe whatever I needed them to believe. I figured out early that honesty is for people who can afford it. For people born with safety nets, I wasn't. So I lied about little things first. Free lunches at school when I didn't qualify. Skipping lines because I claimed I was sick. Stealing pocket change from neighbors. Harmless, right? Survival. But small lies grow into big lies like weeds. When I was 17, I orchestrated my first real con. There was a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. I fit the poor part, sure, but the competition was fierce, and I wasn't the smartest, the most talented, or the most deserving. So I created a story. I crafted an entire persona of the tragic genius kid, living in an abusive home, showing exceptional academic promise against all odds, passionate about making a difference in the world. I forged recommendation letters. I created a fake church community leader to vouch for me. I even went as far as staging a photo of a fake black eye and submitting it as part of a domestic abuse report attachment to my application. I won. Full ride to a prestigious private university. People clapped for me at ceremonies. They called me an inspiration. That was the first time I realized the real secret of success. It's not about being the best, it's about being the best liar in the room. College was more of the same. I realized quickly that wealth wasn't about money, it was about connections. So I became whoever I needed to be to get into the circles that mattered. I learned to dress like them, talk like them, laugh at their jokes even when they were cruel or stupid. I slept with whoever could get me a little further along. Professors, teaching assistants, rich girls with daddies on the board of trustees. I kept my poor background a secret, turned it into a quirky fun fact instead of the desperate reality it had been. I let people project whatever image they wanted onto me. I became a mirror for their own desires. I was their charity project, their diversity quota, their living proof that the system worked. It was during this time that I met Sarah. Sarah is beautiful, brilliant, kind, and most importantly, rich. Old money. Her family had country club memberships, vacation homes, legacy admissions. She was the golden ticket I didn't even know I was looking for until I saw her. Of course, she wouldn't have looked twice at the real me. So I became what she wanted. Sensitive, artistic, from humble beginnings but full of promise. I wove a web so perfect even I started to believe it. We dated. Fell in love, or at least, she fell in love. I pretended so well sometimes I wondered if it was real. For me too. Her family didn't approve, of course. I wasn't one of them, so I worked harder. I got better internships, better grades, better friends. I made sure that every single obstacle her parents threw at me, I crushed. Scholarships, leadership awards, glowing recommendation letters, some forged, some manipulated, some earned through favors I don't care to detail. By the time we graduated, Sarah's parents had grudgingly accepted me. We got engaged, married, a beautiful, lavish wedding that her family paid for. I smiled in every photo, kissed babies, hugged relatives, shook hands with people who would have set me on fire if they knew the truth about who I was. Our life was supposed to be perfect after that. But perfect isn't real. Perfect is a story you tell yourself while the house burns down around you. We struggled at first, despite the cushion her family provided. I bounced between jobs, always just about to make it big. In truth, I was grifting, insider trading, carefully massaging numbers, quietly pushing out co-workers who stood between me and promotions. I built a network of favors, threats, blackmail. Nothing too obvious, nothing traceable. Just enough pressure in the right places to climb over people who thought the rules applied to everyone equally. When I finally landed a high-paying executive job, I thought I had made it. But success only made me hungrier. I started embezzling, skimming off contracts, setting up shell companies and billing my own employer for consulting fees. It was so easy it scared me sometimes. The world isn't run by geniuses. It's run by people too lazy, scared, or stupid to look under the surface. We had kids. 2 beautiful little girls who think their daddy is the best man in the world. Every time they look at me with those wide, trusting eyes, a little more of my soul dies. I go to PTA meetings, soccer games, dance recitals, pretending to be the proud, loving father I desperately want to be. And maybe I am, in a way. But the foundations I've built for them are rotten. If the truth ever comes out, the entire house of cards will collapse and they'll be buried underneath it. Sometimes I tell myself I did it all for them, that every lie, every betrayal, every ruined life was for their future. But that's just another lie. I did it for me, because I was scared, because I was greedy, because I could. Now I'm in my late 30s, wealthy, respected, envied, and absolutely hollow inside. I wonder sometimes how many lives I've destroyed without even knowing it. The co-worker I edged out of a promotion who lost his house. The woman I seduced and discarded to get an introduction to a board member. The friend whose startup I sabotaged because I needed his investors for my own project. I don't even remember all their names anymore. I tell myself that if I just keep giving to charity, coaching my daughter's teams, mentoring young people, that maybe someday the scale will balance out. But it won't, because good deeds don't erase evil ones, they just paint over them. And eventually the paint peels. The cracks show and the rot underneath starts to stink. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe I get caught. Maybe someone from my past pieces it all together and burns everything down. Maybe I die rich and successful, surrounded by a family who never knows the truth, and my secrets rot quietly in the ground with me. Or maybe I break down and confess, destroy everything, lose my family, my career, my life. Part of me wants to. Part of me dreams about standing up in the middle of one of those glittering charity galas, grabbing a microphone, and spilling every filthy truth like a confession at the end of a Shakespearean tragedy. But I won't, because I'm a coward, a liar, a thief. And maybe the worst thing is, even now, after everything, after all the destruction, all the pain I've caused, a part of me still thinks it was worth it. If I were smart, I'd stop now. Leave this confession floating in the anonymous void and walk away. Go kiss my daughters goodnight and pretend none of it happened. But I can't. Not because I'm brave. Let's kill that delusion right now. I'm not. I've never done a brave thing in my life that wasn't self-serving. No, it's because something inside me has started to rot. And the only way to stop the stench is to open the wound and let it bleed. If I'm going to keep talking, I need to talk about Andrew. Because if there was one person I regret destroying more than anyone else, it's him. He was my best friend. My first real friend. The kind of friend who shows up with a shovel if you call them crying at midnight. The kind who drives you 3 hours to a job interview when your car breaks down and never asks for gas money. The kind I didn't deserve. I met Andrew my freshman year. He was the opposite of me, born rich but humble, kind to everyone, quick to laugh, fiercely loyal. Where I saw people as opportunities, Andrew saw them as souls. He wanted to build a life of meaning. I wanted to build an empire of smoke and mirrors. And still, he chose me, took me in, introduced me to his family, lent me money without blinking, defended me when people questioned my past, trusted me with secrets he didn't tell anyone else, and I repaid him by ruining his life. We both majored in business, but Andrew had this idea for a non-profit tech startup, something revolutionary. He wanted to create a platform that matched underprivileged students with industry mentors using AI-powered algorithms. He'd been working on the idea since high school. He brought me into it because he believed I had the drive to make it work, to help turn his vision into a reality. And I did, but not for the reasons he thought. I helped him write the pitch decks, the early prototypes, the grant applications. I stayed up late coding and meeting with donors, not because I believed in the mission, but because I saw how much value it had, if you stripped the helping people part and repackaged it for profit. So while Andrew poured his soul into building a tool for good, I quietly registered a private LLC under a different name, hired a freelance dev team to reverse engineer our software, and rebranded it as an enterprise solution for corporations looking to fulfill DEI quotas. I sold it to a hedge fund through a shell company and walked away with my first real fortune, while Andrew sat in a tiny co-working space wondering why all his funders were suddenly ghosting him. He never suspected me, not once. Even when his startup collapsed, even when his girlfriend left him, tired of the financial instability, even when he started drinking too much and stopped showing up to classes, I stayed in his life just enough to feign support. I'd buy him lunch, lend him money, tell him to hang in there, and all the while I was driving to a second office under a fake name and building an empire on the ashes of his dream. I told myself it was just business, that he was too naive to succeed, that the world would have eaten him alive anyway. But the truth is uglier. I envied him. I hated how pure he was, how easily people loved him without effort. I hated how he never needed to lie to be liked. I hated that, even as I climbed higher, I still felt like a shadow next to him. After college, we drifted apart. I ghosted him gradually, less phone, calls, more vague responses, until he stopped trying. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back home, gone into debt, was struggling with depression. One friend told me he tried to kill himself but survived. I didn't reach out. I told myself I couldn't, that it would make things worse, but really I didn't want to see the reflection of myself in his eyes. I didn't want to face what I'd done. That's when the nightmares started. At first they were small. I'd dream of walking into a room where Andrew was standing, smiling, holding a noose. Or I'd be sitting in one of my executive meetings and suddenly the lights would go out and I'd hear his voice whispering my name. Over time, they got worse, more vivid. I'd see his face on the street, hear his laugh in empty elevators. Sometimes I wonder if I'm going crazy, or if this is just what guilt looks like when it finally grows teeth. My wife doesn't know any of this. She thinks I stopped talking to Andrew because we grew apart. She thinks I'm a loyal friend, a good man. She tells our kids that Daddy helps people for a living. And in some twisted way I do. I donate to charities, I mentor youth, I serve on non-profit boards. But every good thing I do is laced with poison. Every check I write feels like hush money to the universe. Now let's talk about the biggest secret of all, the one that could bring everything crashing down if anyone ever found out. When my first daughter was born, I cried. Not because I was overwhelmed with love, though I was, but because I knew in that moment that if she ever found out who I really was, she would hate me. I swore I'd change, that I'd be better, that the lies would stop with her. But a few years later, when money got tight and the company I was embezzling from changed auditors, I panicked. I didn't stop the grift, I expanded it. I created 2 more companies, buried them under 5 layers of subcontractors, and started laundering money through fake invoices. I hired someone to pose as a tax consultant and had him take the fall when one of the shell companies got audited. He served a 6-month sentence in minimum security. He never even knew who I was. I paid his legal fees through an anonymous donor program, Told myself he got a lighter sentence because of it, that I was being noble. I wasn't. I was just preserving the illusion. And now I'm sitting here in my study typing all this out like it's some kind of absolution. It's not. There's no forgiveness coming for me, I know that. I don't even know why I'm writing this except that I feel like the seams of my mind are starting to split, and if I don't say this to someone, anyone, even avoid like Reddit, I'm going to implode. I sometimes imagine what it would be like to start over, to disappear, fake my death, leave everything behind and go live in some remote village as a nobody. Plant trees, read books, let the weight of my lies rot quietly in the soil. But that's not how this ends, because even if I walked away, the wreckage would remain. Andrew's life, the shell companies, the innocent people who lost jobs, relationships, even freedom because of me. It would all still be there, smoking ruins behind me. I hear footsteps upstairs. My daughter's awake from a nightmare. I'll go to them soon, hug them, whisper that everything is okay, that Daddy's here, that they're safe, and they'll believe me because I'm good at that, at being whoever they need me to be, even if none of it is real. The unraveling didn't come all at once, though part of me had long expected it would. I thought it would be like a single, precise blow, a lawsuit, a scandal, an exposé, some loud, clean break that would finally force me to face what I'd built and broken. But the truth is, rot moves slow and it starts quietly. The first crack appeared in the form of a phone call from an old college acquaintance, someone I hadn't thought about in years. Matt. Just hearing his name stirred the dust of a decade's worth of guilt I'd shoved into a mental storage unit and locked tight. We'd been part of the original team with Andrew, the non-profit startup. Matt wasn't close with us, more of a skilled code monkey we brought in for a project or two. I hadn't spoken to him since graduation, but now here he was, reaching out through LinkedIn of all places, asking if I wanted to grab coffee and catch up. I almost didn't respond. Something about it felt off, the timing, the vagueness. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. We met at a crowded cafe downtown, and the moment I saw him I knew something was wrong. He looked nervous, not twitchy, not paranoid, but guarded, like someone walking across thin ice. We made small talk, mostly surface-level stuff, until he leaned in and said, "I know what you did to Andrew." The way he said it, low, flat, not accusatory, but certain, sent a jolt through me. I tried to keep my face still, feigned confusion, but I could feel the sweat forming under my collar. He pulled out a folder from his backpack, slid it across the table. Inside were printouts, screenshots of early code commits, emails, server, logs, even IP addresses linked to the dummy company I'd set up. He said he'd been working at a consulting firm that had recently taken on a DEI client that was using software suspiciously similar to what Andrew had built, only now it was proprietary and commercial. He'd followed the breadcrumbs, found the shell companies, pieced together enough to know I was involved, even if not directly named anywhere. "I'm not here to blackmail you," he said. "I just thought you should know. I'm talking to Andrew." That sentence haunted me for weeks. I kept telling myself that Andrew wouldn't believe him, that even if he did, there was no proof, connecting me directly to the sale, that my name was scrubbed from every document that mattered. But fear has a way of sharpening your hearing, and suddenly I started noticing the whispers, the way people paused when I walked into meetings, how a board member asked a strange question during a quarterly review about early licensing agreements. The tremors had begun. Then came the second hit. A journalist, freelance, mid-tier but connected, emailed my assistant requesting an interview. She said she was working on a piece about transformative business leaders with controversial pasts. That was the phrase that chilled me. Controversial pasts. My assistant, bless her, forwarded it to our PR rep, who shut it down politely, but the journalist kept digging. I checked her Twitter. She'd recently followed Andrew. Matt, too. She was circling us like a shark. I should have run then. Should have packed up, cashed out and disappeared to Montenegro or Belize or somewhere I couldn't be subpoenaed. But I didn't. Pride, maybe, or cowardice, or some sick part of me that wanted to get caught. So I stayed. And the third blow landed hard. A letter hand-delivered by courier. Not a lawsuit, not a cease and desist, just a letter written by Andrew. 5 pages typed. No threats, no demands, just his truth. He told me he knew everything, that he'd pieced it together over the last year, with help from Matt and a few others, that the realization nearly broke him. That for years he thought he'd just failed, that he wasn't good enough, smart enough, tough enough to survive in the business world. He said he wanted to hate me, but he couldn't. That somewhere, deep down, he still missed me. He remembered nights in college, lying on the dorm floor talking about the future. Remembered how we'd planned to change the world. "I don't want your money," he wrote. "I don't want revenge. I just want to know why." And I couldn't answer him. I couldn't even bring myself to call. Instead, I locked the letter in my safe like a cursed relic and doubled down. I hired private security to sweep my house for surveillance, increased encryption on every device, started paying a cyber forensics firm to monitor the dark web for mentions of my name. I even considered bribing Matt, not to silence him but to offer him a job, a golden cage. One he might never leave if the salary was high enough. But then came the leak, not a massive Snowden-scale dump, just a single document, an internal memo from one of my shell companies, posted anonymously to a Reddit thread under a throwaway account. At first, no one noticed, but then someone cross-referenced a line of code in the memo to an old GitHub repository Andrew had made public years ago, and suddenly the thread exploded. Theories flew, names were tossed around. My company trended on Twitter. My assistant called in a panic. My wife saw the hashtag and asked me over dinner, "What is this about?" And for a moment, I thought about telling her everything. But I didn't. I told her it was a smear campaign, that it would blow over, that people get jealous when you succeed. She believed me, she always does, but the cracks were widening. Investors started calling. My CFO asked for a private meeting. The board scheduled an emergency session. I prepped a damage control plan, leaked a fake scandal to draw attention elsewhere, and even considered burning the company to the ground with a fake bankruptcy to shield myself. I had contingencies layered in offshore accounts, passports under Helios's exit strategies drawn up by black market brokers. I was ready, but I didn't expect what happened next. Andrew went public, not with rage, not with vengeance, with grace. He posted a video, simple, no frills, telling his story. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. He just laid out the timeline, showed the documents, explained how his dream had been stolen, warped, and sold. And then he said something that shattered me. "I don't want to destroy anyone. I just want the truth to be known. Because people matter, ideas matter, and integrity matters even when it costs everything." That video went viral, not because of scandal, but because it was so rare to see someone speak from a place of quiet, pain, and dignity. People rallied behind him, old donors, new investors, even celebrities. Within weeks, he relaunched the platform. Open source, funded by a massive GoFundMe campaign, backed by tech influencers who offered to work pro bono. Meanwhile, I was drowning in PR nightmares, internal mutiny, shareholder outrage, and through it all I kept thinking, why didn't I just let him win? Why did I have to take everything from him? I still don't have the answer. All I know is that now, as I sit in this office, I feel like a man buried alive in gold. Every achievement, every dollar, every inch of status. It feels heavy, suffocating. My daughters play outside in the yard and laugh, and I wonder what they'll think of me when they're old enough to Google my name. My wife sleeps beside me, unaware that every kiss I give her is laced with guilt. I built a kingdom, and I am its king. But the walls are paper and the wind is rising. I have not told anyone this story in full until now. If you're reading this, maybe you hate me. Maybe you pity me. Maybe you see a version of yourself in me. Maybe you just want to watch someone burn. I don't blame you. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the past doesn't stay buried forever. It always digs its way back up, clawing through the soil of your life until you either face it or get swallowed whole. And I'm still deciding which one I'll choose. The collapse wasn't cinematic, though looking back it's almost disappointing how banal the end of an empire can be. There were no FBI raids, no televised perp walks in front of flashing cameras, no screaming headlines with my face plastered. across them like some fallen mogul. No, the real destruction came quietly, piece by piece, like termites hollowing out the beams of a once grand house, until one day it simply crumbles under its own weight. It started with the investors, first cautious, then panicked, then ruthless, pulling their money out like blood from a corpse, leaving the stock price spiraling down in a slow, brutal descent that the financial press labeled a confidence crisis, though in reality it was nothing so abstract. It was a reckoning. Our partners reneged on deals, clients demanded audits, lawsuits began trickling in, not from Andrew, but from third parties claiming damages tied to misrepresented assets, and while none of them had enough teeth individually, the sheer volume became its own kind of death sentence. My executive team, once fiercely loyal, began defecting one by one, each exit announced with carefully worded public statements about pursuing new opportunities or spending more time with family, each betrayal a slow knife twisting deeper into my gut. Even my inner circle, the men and women I had mentored, molded, and sometimes manipulated, turned against me with a kind of desperate fervor, leaking internal emails, feeding half-truths and innuendos to hungry reporters, crafting their own redemption arcs at my expense. Meanwhile, Andrew's platform exploded, fueled by a wave of public sympathy and grassroots support that seemed almost religious in its fervor. He was the wounded idealist reborn as a visionary, while I became the convenient villain in every narrative, the embodiment of greed and betrayal in a world starved for easy morals. I tried to fight back at first, hired crisis PR firms, attempted counter-lawsuits, even floated the idea of buying out Andrew's new venture through proxies. But every move I made only cemented the perception of guilt, every counterpunch painting me as a desperate, flailing man trying to claw his way out of a grave he had dug with his own hands. And all the while my personal life was unraveling too, not in fiery blowouts but in small, devastating silences. My wife began retreating behind polite smiles and carefully scheduled book club nights that stretched later and later. My daughters grew wary, flinching when I raised my voice over something trivial. Friends stopped returning calls, stopped inviting us to gatherings, until one day I realized that I had become a ghost in my own life, haunting the periphery of a world that had moved on without me. The final blow came one humid evening when I came home to find a note on the kitchen counter, written in my wife's careful, looping handwriting. "I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I'm taking the girls to my parents for a while." No fight, no confrontation, just absence. I stood there in the silence of the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, staring at that note until the words blurred together, realizing that there was no one left to blame but myself. I poured a drink, then another, until the night dissolved into a blur of drunken regrets and half-formed apologies shouted into an empty house. When I woke up the next morning, sprawled on the living room floor, my first thought wasn't about saving my company or my reputation. It was about Andrew. I realized with a clarity that felt like a blade carving through my chest that I didn't just ruin his career. I stole his life. I took the years he should have spent building, dreaming, thriving, and I traded them for my own fleeting glory. I didn't just betray a friend, I murdered a future, and no amount of spin or settlement could ever fix that. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the phone and called him. To my surprise, he answered. His voice was calm, almost weary, like someone who had lived through the fire and come out the other side, made of something harder and colder. I told him I was sorry, not in the performative, legalistic way I had rehearsed for lawyers and investors, but raw, stumbling, pathetic. I told him everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every rationalization I used to sleep at night. I told him that he was better than me, that he had always been better than me, that I envied him even as I destroyed him. And when I finished, there was a long, terrible silence on the line, and then he said, "I forgive you, but I don't trust you, and I never will." And then he hung up. That was it. No grand catharsis, no absolution, just a simple, devastating truth. Some things, once broken, can never be rebuilt. The company folded 6 months later, after a vicious shareholder revolt forced my resignation, and triggered a cascade of debt obligations we couldn't meet. I liquidated everything, stocks, real estate, assets, just to cover the legal fees and settlements. I sold the house at a loss. I gave my wife everything she asked for in the divorce just to avoid another courtroom. I moved into a rented condo downtown, anonymous and alone, spending my days consulting for companies that didn't know or didn't care about my past, spending my nights staring out over a city skyline that used to feel like a symbol of my triumph and now just looked like a mausoleum of my failures. Sometimes, late at night, I browse Andrew's platform, now a thriving ecosystem for social good projects, non-profit collaborations, and grassroots activism. And I wonder what might have been if I had just let him win. If I had believed that there was enough success for both of us. If I hadn't been so goddamned afraid of being ordinary. I wonder if he ever thinks about me. I wonder if he ever regrets forgiving me. Because if I'm being honest, truly, brutally honest, I don't think I deserved it. I think he forgave me because he had to. Because carrying hate would have destroyed him the way ambition destroyed me. I think he chose to survive, while I chose to win. And in the end, survival was the only real victory. As for me, I'm still here, breathing, existing, but not living, not really. Because the truth is, when you build your identity on the ruins of someone else's dreams, you don't get to keep it. You don't get to be proud of it. You just get to sit among the ashes, remembering the fire. I think part of me believed that if I just disappeared long enough, if I allowed time to do its dull work of erosion, I'd emerge from the ruins as something softer, more forgivable, a cautionary tale perhaps, but not a villain. But time doesn't redeem, it only forgets, and forgetting is its own kind of death. After the company dissolved and the settlements drained the last marrow from my accounts, I existed in a strange half-life, not quite punished, not quite free, a man untethered from the machine he once powered, adrift in a city that no longer whispered his name with reverence or fear. I began volunteering, at first just to fill the hours, to mask the inertia of failure with motion. Soup kitchens, literacy programs, a youth center on the east side run by a woman named Maria, who never asked what I had done, but looked at me with eyes that suggested she knew more than she said. I scrubbed graffiti, repaired broken shelves, helped teenagers with college essays I knew they couldn't afford to submit, and for brief moments I felt almost human again. But no matter how many shifts I worked or how many late-night donation runs I made, the guilt clung to me like mold, seeping into the walls of every interaction. I would smile at a kid's joke and then, involuntarily, wonder if his father had lost a pension because of my actions. I'd help a struggling single mum fill out a housing application and think about the wives I'd quietly ruined when their husbands were laid off in a cost-saving pivot I orchestrated. The scales never balanced. They never even moved. I reached out to my daughters, cautiously at first, through emails and cards I wasn't sure they'd read. My oldest replied once, a short message that said, "I don't know what to say to you yet." My youngest blocked my number after I left a voicemail. On her birthday, their mother, my ex-wife, sent back a sealed envelope I had mailed her with a check and a letter. The envelope unmarked, unbroken, like a coffin never opened. I began seeing a therapist, a quiet man named Dr. Rosen, who seemed immune to both my charm and my shame, and week by week, he chipped away at the persona I'd spent decades building. He made me talk about my father, a man I had not thought about in years, a man whose approval I had chased like a ghost, and whose voice, stern and sharp, echoed every time I looked in the mirror. We dissected my need for control, my hunger for recognition, my belief that love was something to be won, not given freely. I remember the day Dr. Rosen looked at me and said, "You've been trying to resurrect your boyhood wounds with adult victories, but the battlefield was always inside you." That sentence broke something in me, not dramatically but quietly, like a dam cracking under pressure you didn't know was there. After that, I stopped trying to fix things and started simply being present, sweeping floors, stacking chairs, listening without speaking. One night, I stayed late at the youth center to help Maria prepare for a fundraiser. She poured us both tea and sat beside me in the folding chairs, staring at the mural the kids had painted on the far wall. A swirl of hands, bright colors, a phoenix rising from the ashes. "You ever think about what your legacy is?" she asked. I told her mine was already written, in court transcripts and headlines and bankrupted dreams. She shook her head. "No, that's your story. Your legacy's what you do now." That night I cried in the car until my throat gave out. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to. I wanted to believe that we are more than the worst. Things we've done, that there is life after disgrace, that penance doesn't have to look like punishment. But the truth is, some wounds don't close. They scab and scar and scream in silence. I still see Andrew's face sometimes in dreams, sometimes angry, sometimes indifferent, but never smiling, and I wonder if I could undo any of it, if I would. That's the real sickness. Part of me still loves what I built, still mourns its fall, still aches for the applause. I walk among people now who don't know my name, who see me as nothing more than another aging volunteer in a threadbare coat, and part of me finds peace in that anonymity. But there's another part, the one that wakes me at 3 a.m., that replays the betrayal like a film I cannot turn off, that knows I don't deserve peace. That part whispers, this is not enough. And maybe it never will be. Maybe redemption isn't a destination, but a path you walk alone, without guarantee, without applause, without end. Maybe the best I can hope for is that when I die, someone will say he tried in the end, and maybe that will be enough, or maybe that's just another lie I tell myself to sleep. The truth is, I started writing this not for you, not for Reddit, not for any imaginary tribunal of strangers who might judge or forgive or comment with clever one-liners to bury the horror under upvotes, but for myself, because there comes a point where the walls you've built around your own narrative begin to crack, and the story you told yourself about who you are no longer holds up to the weight of silence. I've spent years clawing toward redemption, volunteering, sitting in therapy, sending messages into the void hoping they'd land somewhere soft, but somewhere along the way, I began to wonder if it was all just another performance, another mask. Maybe even this confession is just a new stage, a final gasp of ego dressed in humility, a dying man hoping that if he tells his story with enough sorrow, enough detail, enough craft, someone somewhere will say, he was flawed, but he was honest. But honesty without change is just another form of manipulation, isn't it? And I've changed so little. My hair is grayer, my body sags in ways that reflect the weight of time and shame. But the internal engine, that relentless, desperate, need to be seen to be right, still thrums beneath the surface, quieter now but no less demanding. A few weeks ago I saw Andrew in person for the first time in years. It wasn't planned. I was leaving the community center after a late shift, taking out the trash of all things, and he was standing across the street, looking up at the mural the kids had painted. For a moment I thought he might not recognize me. I looked smaller now, less defined, but then our eyes met, and there was no mistaking it. His face didn't contort with anger or disgust, just a kind of solemn recognition, like looking at the site of a car crash long after the bodies have been cleared. He didn't cross the street. He just lifted a hand in a gesture that was neither greeting nor farewell, something between acknowledgement and closure. And then he walked away. And that should have been the end, right? The arc completed, the moment of reckoning passed, the weight lifted. But it wasn't. Instead, I went home and stared at myself in the mirror for what must have been an hour. I looked at my own reflection, this gaunt, hollow-eyed version of the man I once was, and felt something worse than guilt, worse than regret. I felt nothing. I realized I no longer knew who I was without the narrative of the villain, the fallen titan, the penitent sinner. Without the scaffolding of shame and redemption to prop me up, I was just empty, a man whose life had become a postscript. That night I opened the box. It's a heavy black fireproof safe I keep under my bed, filled with the last artifacts of the empire I built. Not the financials or the headlines, but the real detritus. Old letters, signed NDAs, encrypted flash drives with contracts and buried communications, photographs from the earliest days when Andrew and I were still building something pure. There's a video in there too, one I've never watched, recorded the day I forced him out. security footage. I'd had it archived for legal protection, but really, I think I just wanted proof that it happened the way I told it, to prove that he had been emotional, unreasonable, unfit. But watching it now, I saw a man trying to hold on to his life while everything he believed in was being stolen out from under him. He cried, not like a child, not dramatically, but like a man quietly breaking, trying to preserve dignity while drowning. I watched myself on screen, calm, composed, wielding words like scalpels, and I didn't see a leader or a visionary. I saw a coward in a suit. That night I drank. Not just a glass of whiskey like in the old days, but bottles. I drank until the lines blurred, until the memory of that video smeared into 1,000 regretful frames. Then I wrote a letter, not to Andrew, not to my ex-wife or my daughters, but to the board of a non-profit Andrew had founded. I confessed everything, not just what I had done to him, but the deals I buried, the people I stepped over, the systems I corrupted. I included the flash drives, no NDAs, no protections, just raw truth, unfiltered. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something like release. Not peace, never peace, but release, like finally putting down a weight that had become part of my body. I mailed the package the next morning and spent the day waiting for a knock at the door, a call from a lawyer, a headline online that would finish the job of tearing me apart. But it didn't come. Not that day. Not yet. Maybe they haven't opened it. Maybe they won't care. Maybe silence is my final punishment. Or maybe the worst thing of all is that the world has moved on, and I'm simply not worth the reckoning anymore. But I'm not done. Not yet. I've started writing a book, privately, no publisher, no pitch, just a document on an encrypted drive titled Confession. Every memory, every lie, every moment I chose the easier path. I don't know if anyone will ever read it. I don't know if I want them to, but I need to finish it, even if it kills me, because some truths are too heavy to carry unspoken, and maybe when it's done, I'll finally know who I am without the masks. Or maybe I'll finally accept that I was never anyone at all. It's strange how clarity doesn't arrive in grand epiphanies, but instead creeps in during the quietest moments, like when I'm standing in the shower, hand pressed to the tile, watching the water spiral into the drain as if it's trying to show me how everything slips away eventually. I've kept writing not because I believe in redemption. God, no, I abandoned that illusion long ago, but because I've grown afraid that if I stop documenting, I'll disappear entirely. There's a deep horror in that, the idea that you can die long before your heart stops beating. That erasure happens slowly, invisibly, like a house sinking into a swamp until only the roof remains. And still, I kept going. The community center, the therapy sessions, the letters never sent. But then, 3 nights ago, something happened that snapped everything in half. I was walking home from a late shift. It had rained and the pavement shimmered under the streetlights, and I saw a man standing under the awning of a closed liquor store. He was thin, wiry, hunched into a coat too large for him, but even from a distance I knew. My heart stuttered. I crossed the street like a sleepwalker, and as I got closer he looked up and smiled, not cruelly, not smugly, just with a kind of quiet, knowing that sent a bolt of cold through my spine. It was Andrew. Or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Anymore. He said nothing, just nodded, turned and walked away, disappearing into the alley between buildings like he'd never been there at all. I stood frozen, the rain soaking through my coat, and something in me ruptured. Not grief, not fear, something older. A recognition. That night, I tore the house apart. I pulled every file, every drive, every record, and laid them out like artifacts in a crime scene. I reread every document, every NDA, every email. I watched the video again. Not the one of the boardroom confrontation. I'd burned that copy already. But another, older one I had forgotten, a recording from years before, when Andrew and I were still building the company. It was a birthday party, of all things. My ex-wife had planned it as a surprise, and the office was filled with balloons and bad sheet cake and laughter, so real it hurt to hear. In the background, Andrew was holding court, telling some awful joke that made everyone groan and laugh anyway. And then he looked at me. In the video you can see it, just a second, a flash, But he looked at me with complete trust, like a man who believed we were building something that mattered, something real. And I had destroyed it. Not just him, not just the company, but the idea that anything could be built without blood on the foundation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cut the power to the house and sit in the dark. But instead I poured a drink, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the book I'd been writing. I deleted the entire thing, every word. Gone. Because it hit me then. Even this massive, intricate, heart-wrenching confession was just another monument to myself. A mausoleum with my name etched into every brick. I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want to be remembered. I wanted to be erased. I thought about disappearing again, not physically, not in the old coward's way of fleeing to another city or changing my name, but truly vanishing, going into the woods maybe, dropping off the grid. But even that felt performative. A final, melodramatic flourish, and then came the twist I never expected. Not from the world, but from inside me. Because as I sat there deleting the last files, a new idea wormed into my brain. What if I never existed in the way I remembered? What if I had rewritten the past so many times, tweaked the timelines, reframed the betrayals, sculpted the villain? I could bear to live with that the real truth was far worse. I started checking dates, timelines, old letters, and slowly, horrifyingly, a different narrative began to emerge. One where I hadn't just betrayed Andrew. One where Andrew hadn't even wanted power. He had tried to walk away, and I had blackmailed him. Subtly, insidiously, threats wrapped in concern, leverage disguised as love. The moment of ousting I remembered as a boardroom ambush was, in fact, orchestrated by me down to the last whisper. The anger I thought I'd witnessed from him was really stunned silence, and I, master of perception, had rewritten the moment into something almost noble. I had gaslit myself, for years. It hit me like ice through the chest. I wasn't the fallen, leader seeking redemption. I was the architect of annihilation, who painted over the blood with good intentions. And now I don't know what's left to say. I don't know what part 8 could even be, because what do you write when the person who's been confessing isn't real? What do you admit to when the worst thing isn't what you did? But how well? You've hidden the truth from yourself. Maybe this isn't a confession. Maybe it's a warning. That self-deception is the most elaborate prison. That guilt is only useful if it leads to truth. And that sometimes the person who tells the story is the most dangerous liar of all. It's hard to describe the particular flavor of madness that sets in once you realize you may not have ever known yourself. It's not cinematic, not screaming in mirrors or tearing down wallpaper, but a quieter, more insidious disintegration. It's standing in the kitchen with the fridge door open for 10 minutes, forgetting what you were looking for. It's rereading a sentence you just wrote 5 times and not remembering a single word. It's lying in bed at 3:42 a.m., replaying conversations from 10 years ago and wondering if the words you remember were ever spoken at all. After deleting the draft of my confession, I tried to live in silence. I thought if I removed the narrative, the ego, the constant dissection, maybe I could finally feel something clean. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. I started walking at night again like I used to in the early days after everything collapsed. I'd drift through the neighborhood like a ghost, avoiding streetlights, tracing the outlines of lives I would never have. I passed homes where families laughed through their windows, where fathers lifted children onto their shoulders, where couples argued with the casual intimacy of people who still believed they had a future. And then there was me, dragging the weight of my past like a body bag through the shadows. I kept seeing him, Andrew, or maybe just figments of him. Sometimes at the edge of the community center parking lot, sometimes sitting on a bench near the old church, sometimes in reflections that vanished when I looked too hard. I stopped trusting my senses. I started writing again, not the confession, not the book, but notebooks filled with scrambled thoughts, diagrams, timelines, theories. I tried to chart out where it all began, but it was like trying to diagram smoke. Every time I thought I had found the route, the moment where the path forked and I chose the darker one, I'd find an earlier moment, a subtler manipulation, a smaller cruelty I had minimized for years. The worst realization wasn't that I had rewritten the past. It was that I had rewritten it so many times that the original may no longer exist. I don't know which version of myself is real. The visionary, the thief, the coward, the victim, the predator. Or are they all just shades of the same sickness, wearing different faces to survive the moment? My therapist, the one I'd been seeing for years, finally gave up. Not because I was rude or combative, but because she said, gently, sadly, that I wasn't healing. I was narrating. "You speak like someone describing grief, not feeling it," she said. "I think you've built a fortress out of self-awareness, and nothing can reach you inside it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "Isn't awareness the first step? Isn't self-examination the path to change?" But I knew she was right. I'd built a cathedral of insight, a glorious hall of mirrors where every flaw was understood, but none were changed. I didn't feel grief. I performed it. The unraveling grew sharper. I began losing time. Not in dramatic fugue states, but in hours that slipped by unnoticed. I'd look up from the window and realize it was morning. I'd open the fridge and find food I didn't remember buying. Once I found a note in my own handwriting that said, "Stop trying to explain, just end it." I don't remember writing it. I started dreaming of fire. Not metaphorical, literal fire. Buildings I'd never seen engulfed in flame. Andrew standing in the middle, untouched, watching me with eyes that didn't accuse or forgive, just witnessed. I woke up from one of those dreams with the smell of smoke in my nostrils and claw marks on my palms. There are no candles in my house, no fireplace, nothing that could have explained the scent. I'm not saying something supernatural is happening. I don't believe in ghosts or karma. I believe in guilt, in the psyche as a prison, and in the terrifying possibility that if you dig deep enough, you might find a version of yourself so monstrous that no story can contain it. That brings me to the final document, the one file I'd kept encrypted, buried under layers of security so dense even I had to dig through old drives to find the key. I opened it last night, and what I found made me wish I hadn't. It was a recording, not a video, an audio file, 27 minutes and 46 seconds, a conversation between me and Andrew, one I had completely blocked from memory. It wasn't a confrontation, it wasn't even an argument. It was worse. It was calm. I listened to myself as I dismantled him, not with cruelty, but with surgical precision. "You don't have the stomach for what's coming," I said, my voice smooth, cold. "This isn't about ideals, it's about control. We can't both steer the ship, Andrew. One of us has to go." And Andrew, he didn't fight. He didn't yell. He just broke. You can hear it in his voice. The way he tries to hold on to some version of me he still believes in. The way he asks, "So this is who you really are?" And I answer, "No. This is who I have to be." I turned the file off halfway through. I couldn't listen to the rest. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because it wasn't just the betrayal, it was the certainty in my voice, the conviction. I wasn't a man caught in moral ambiguity. I was a man who had already made peace with being a monster. And now I don't know what's left. I could release the file, send it to the world, strip myself of the last layer of protection. But would that be justice? Or just another performance? Another act of self-immolation staged for applause? Or maybe the truth is I don't want justice. I don't want forgiveness. I want erasure. I want the version of me who smiled in that recording to vanish into static. But that's not how memory works. That's not how stories end. They linger. They rot. They echo in the people we damage. So here I am, not confessing, not redeeming. Just documenting the ruins, because some lives don't get a resolution, they just burn. It's strange how final moments feel more like echoes than climaxes. I always imagined that if I ever faced Andrew again, it would be a dramatic showdown, a confrontation in the rain or a furious phone call, words exchanged with sharp precision, a battle of wills where one of us would break, one of us would win. But when the time finally came, it wasn't like that at all. I didn't seek him out, I didn't even plan it. It was one of those rare moments where the universe steps in and replays the part of the script you've been avoiding. But with a twist, I was standing at the bus stop near the community center, waiting for the last bus of the night. The city was quiet, the streets slick from another brief downpour. I had been trying to let go of the idea of seeking redemption, to stop pretending that an apology would fix things. I was tired, empty. When I looked across the street, there he was. Andrew, standing under the flickering light of a street lamp, hands in his pockets, staring into the dark. He didn't seem to notice me at first, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then he looked up and we locked eyes. No words, nothing. Just a look, a kind of resignation in his expression. He was still standing there when the bus arrived, and I didn't move. I didn't even get on. Instead, I crossed the street, walking toward him as though drawn by a force I couldn't escape, a gravity of the past that finally had me in its grasp. He didn't flinch, didn't step back. He just stood there waiting. I was close enough now to hear the soft sound of his breath. I could feel his presence, solid and unyielding, like the truth itself. "Andrew," I said, my voice coming out, quieter than I expected. "I don't have much to say." He nodded slowly as if he already knew that. And then I said something I didn't plan to say, something that cut deeper than any confession or apology I could have imagined. "I can't fix what I've done to you. I don't even know what I'd say if I tried." For the first time in years, his face shifted, an almost imperceptible twitch in his eyes. It wasn't pity, it wasn't anger. It was something else, something raw. And then, for a brief second, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Andrew, the one who believed in second chances, the one who believed in the possibility of redemption. But it was gone before I could fully register it. He looked away, his gaze drifting past me to the empty streets. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like an entire lifetime, everything unsaid, everything broken, everything that had already been lost. And in that silence, I realized something I had refused to confront before. I wasn't just a man who had wronged Andrew. I wasn't just the villain of this story. I was the man who could never undo what he'd done, not because of guilt or punishment, but because the damage was part of me now. I had become the lie I'd tried to escape. And as I stood there in front of Andrew, the weight of the realization crushed me, not just for him, not just for what I took from him, but for the endless years I had wasted trying to outrun myself, trying to rewrite my past like I could just move on from the wreckage I had caused. I watched as he turned and began walking away, slowly, like a man who knew there was no going back, no redemption left to be had. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to beg him to turn around, to yell at me, to finally let me feel something. But the words wouldn't come. And just like that, he disappeared into the dark, and I was left standing alone, empty-handed, with the full weight of everything I had done pressing down on me. I don't know how long I stood there after he was gone. Time feels different when you're facing your own undoing. But eventually I turned and walked back to my apartment. No dramatic epiphany, no grand closure, just the silent steps of a man who knows there's nothing left to say, nothing left to do. I haven't opened my computer since. I haven't written a single word. The notebook I've kept for years now sits on my desk, closed and gathering dust. I have no more stories to tell, no more confessions to make, because there's no redemption for people like me, not in any real sense. You don't get to erase your past, you don't get to rewrite the hurt you caused. You live with it. That's the truth. Maybe, in some way, that's the only thing worth sharing. Maybe that's the only story left. I'm not the villain in the end, I'm not the hero. I'm just a man who did what he did, who can never undo it. And that's the hardest thing of all. To realize that even the story you've told yourself about who you are isn't enough to save you. So this is where it ends. No dramatic final confession, no heroic act, just the quiet aftermath of everything I've lost. The story I told myself was never real, and now there's nothing left but the silence.